It's like impossible to not create a homeschool experience that is fun. First of all, we don't care about grades. So we threw grades out the window. I don't care about that. The minute you do that, everything changes. My kids have teachers, they learn languages, they're doing things that I don't have to know that to teach it.
Welcome to Legacy Launchpad, where kingdom-minded entrepreneurs build profitable businesses without compromising faith or family. I'm Leah McHenry. Let's build your legacy together.
This is the first time we're actually talking, so super excited about it.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to talk to you as well. We've been kind of acquaintances in the space, in the business space, and I know we have a lot in common, just like certain values and things that we believe in. So that's led to this conversation, which is really fun.
Like to actually even like a really specific degree.
Yeah.
Share even some like much more specific faith values, which is awesome. Awesome. So first off, just tell me a bit about your background. I know you're a homeschooling mom. That's everywhere. I also know you run multiple businesses, but for anybody who doesn't know that, just like lay the background and then we'll like dig in a little deeper.
All right. Well, I don't want to bore anyone to death with my whole childhood life story or anything, but long story short, I come from a background like raised in the church and stuff, but a lot of brokenness, a lot of divorce, a lot of dysfunction, that kind of thing. Love my family. They're all amazing people, but brokenness, right? Like sin, like, yeah, it really gets in there. I had a pretty rough go during my teenage years, really got off course. In fact, I was so lost. I was so aimless. And I really think that I had a lot of potential inside me, like to do all kinds of things. I had dreams, like I wanted to be a singer and all of this. And I kind of felt looked over, like nobody really noticed. Nobody saw that potential in me. And I didn't know what to do with myself. And quite frankly, I just started partying and doing what people do when they have a lot of pain and nowhere for it to go. And I didn't know what to do with myself. I had no mentors. I had nothing. And then, I don't know, I feel like the Lord just intervened. I was even in dangerous situations. I mean, I was like, for the grace of God, right? I'm talking like drunk drivers and stuff. Like I was in situations I should have never been in and super dangerous, like that kind of thing. And came out of it just, I feel like God still had a hold on my life, but I had no idea what he was going to do with me. And I didn't know what I was going to do with me. And then he ended up bringing a lot of healing to me through my marriage and having family, kids and stuff like that. Like I didn't even think I wanted kids. That was not on my radar. Wasn't something. I think I went through so much trauma and stuff like that I just I don't want kids. And I had a very kind of doom and gloom outlook of the future because that's what I was taught, like the world is going to get worse. We should expect things to get worse. In fact, Jesus is not coming back until it gets really, really bad. And then we'll all just be zapped out of here. And so I just thought there's no hope for the future. And that really affected how I lived my everyday life. And so it really came about, like all the change came about first through marriage. And I'm not saying that marriage is a cure-all for people's problems, but the Lord used it in my life. And I started to get some of that stability. And then you have like the challenge of marriage and just like the type of character development that it takes to just stay married. Like it takes, like if you're not willing to work on yourself, good luck. Yeah. And then motherhood came quickly. We had our first child. I was like 9 months pregnant on our first year anniversary. So it was like, boom, God was like,
wow.
It's happening. Yes. So there wasn't a lot of, it was actually quite fast me going from like lost teen to like young, married and mother.
Yeah.
All at once.
How old are you?
I was 20 when we got married to 21 when I had my first. So
nice.
Yeah.
Me
so
and my wife got married really young too. I was 23, but my wife was 19.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So you guys know exactly what this is like. So our oldest now is 19 and a half. So
Lark is my only son and he is 7 right now.
Yeah. So having kids at a young age, immediately I had to recalibrate everything. And it was so good. It was like, all I can say is those are things that someone could resist and they could, fight against. I guess I still had a softened heart to the Lord, and I always wanted to be in his will, in his favor. And he used marriage and family, having children, to completely change me. But I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I barely babysat kids when I was a teenager. Like I really didn't know what I was doing. But I knew that if I'm going to raise these kids, I want to do it different. I obviously don't want them going through what I went through. I want to break any kind of cycle of divorce. It was multiple divorces on both sides. So I saw my parents divorce, remarry, like 2-3 times each.
Oh, wow.
So it was like, wow, okay, I clearly am going to have a pretty messed up view of commitment, marriage. Like, I don't even know what a healthy relationship looks like, to be honest. So I had to figure it all out. And that was one of many things I had to figure out. And then it wasn't until I think my kids were like 4 or 5 years old, I started working on my music career because I said I would always want to be a singer, wanted to be a musician. That was my dream. And finally had a chance to like write an album. So I did. I was always songwriting no matter what. And it was one of those things like if you never got paid, no one ever found out, you just do it anyway because it's in you. So I started working on my music career and then I actually completed that album and then I had to figure out how am I going to, I didn't have an audience yet, right? It was one of those things where I didn't think about that till after the fact. And I was like, well, how do I get people to like hear the music? So that's when I started like learning more about the music industry and learning more about how do people build fans and stuff like that. And then I quickly realized, well, the traditional way is hop on a tour bus, start playing everywhere. Like it's all about the gigs. I was like, I got 3 little babies, you know, this is not going to work. I've got so many obligations. Like I'm scraping spaghetti off the table here. Like that's not practical. So what else can I do? Because I feel like I put all this effort in, but nobody knows about me. And so that began my quest to start learning about marketing and online business. And I quickly started to realize that, in fact, the more I studied the music industry, the more disheartening it is, and the more I don't think that's going to work. So I started shifting more to learning about online marketing formats. I was like, well, maybe if I start doing what everybody else, like other kinds of businesses, what they're doing online, they're clearly, it's like thriving. We're still in the 2010s decade, right? Like things were really booming online. This is like before Amazon was even really huge like the way it is today. So what I ended up having to do is stop studying the music industry and I started studying online business. And that when I just shifted my tasks and like what I was doing, then I started building an audience online and everything started snowballing from there. Ended up building a nice little, like a little cash flow business out of my music without having left my house, without touring. So I was like purely an online musician selling music and merchandise. So digital music, physical music, t-shirts, stuff like that. And when I looked at it, I was like, you know, this is actually an e-commerce business. That's what this is.
Yeah.
And I'm selling digital products too, but it's a brand. It's like a personal brand, but it's e-com. So then I kind of started really studying e-commerce and like all of that. And ended up building like a annual six-figure music business as a homeschool mom who's never toured. And so then that led me to, I thought, well, maybe I could add another stream of income to this and like teach other musicians. I'll write an ebook or something like that. And I did. I wrote an ebook and I thought, well, I got friends asking me how I've been doing it. Wrote the ebook. It didn't sell. It totally flopped. Didn't work. And then I saw someone else doing a webinar and they were kind of in the same industry. And I was like, I think I could kill that. I think I could do that pretty good. So then I was like, okay, what if I take my ebook and I like make it a video course and I sell it on like one of these webinar things? Like, what would happen? So I did that. And it's all very curiosity driven. And yeah, we kind of knocked it out of the park. My husband started like helping me a little bit behind the scenes with this. And so we went from that and out to me like teaching my methods of what I did as a homeschooling musician. And that first, it was basically a digital course business that went to like 2.5 million in the first year. And we were just like, what just happened? It can't be real. And so it was like just pure disbelief. And then we had to, you know, it wasn't like winning the lottery or anything like that, because with crazy explosion of sales like that comes a lot of not just a steep learning curve, but like incredible amount of crazy things, like everything from taxes to that many customers coming in. You've got disgruntled customers or people who should have never joined, or they were never talented to begin with, by the way, if you don't filter them, which is like, you know, a whole thing.
Hard to tell somebody on like a customer service chat, like, hey, just so you know, hey, you're not really good, so this isn't going to work for you.
Yeah. Well, and if you just let anybody can buy it, well, then you're not filtering who's actually talented or not. And then it's like, hey, well, you could have the best marketing system in the world, but if you don't actually have talent, we can't help you. Sorry. So dealing with all of that, it was quite a shock to the system. There was so much that happened in that time. It was, I mean, we went to a conference one time and we told them our story in a very experienced room of like 9-figure business owners. And they're like, I'm really sorry that happened to you, that you were so successful that fast. I would never wish that on my enemy just because of everything that comes with it when it's that rapid.
Yeah.
But obviously that changed our lives. It definitely did. But then we did that for about 5 years. And then I was still like, my music business has always been my own case study. Like I release an album every few years and I use that as a continual case study for different things. I've done Kickstarters, I've done multiple 6-figure Kickstarters, things like that, where it's all about building an audience first, letting the customers fund the project or fund the whatever the goal is, and then delivering the goods after the fact. So I got really, really good at things like pre-selling and, building audiences quickly, selling products before I'd made them, and then fulfilling later. So that was all part of that story. And then ended up switching more into e-commerce. And when we launched our candle brand in 2020. So in 2020, I thought, I'm not really sure if this whole thing is a fluke with okay, I did the music business thing, but I don't know, maybe I was at the right place at the right time. Yeah, I did the music marketing academy, but again, maybe I was just at the right place at the right time. I kind of want to see if I can do this again. Let me see if I can, I want to test my own skills here. Let me pick a product that has nothing to do with my music, has nothing to do with music marketing or coaching or anything like that. Let me just do a product on its own. And so I had this idea for candles. And I did test it out initially in a crowdfunding campaign as a perk, but then I thought, okay, I like this. This is a lot of fun. Let me build a totally separate standalone brand, start from scratch, and let me see if I can do this. So we did that. And that one also went to 7 figures in about 9 months. And so I was like, okay, again though, but is it not a fluke? I don't know. Okay, but there's more to the story. I mean, I will say, looking back, yes, there's skills involved for sure. And I don't think it's a fluke, but we did have some tailwind for sure with the lockdowns and everything. Like people were home shopping. So we did get a lot more eyeballs than, I don't know, it might have taken us longer to get there. I think we would have gotten there anyway. But so we've been doing that for the last 5 years. And then I do now business coaching in general as well, just because I'm a born teacher. I have my dad's DNA. I don't feel right if I'm not teaching. So I always have something with that going on the side, but not just musicians. It's like everybody. I have a real passion for Christian entrepreneurs and people trying to build the kingdom of God out here on earth. These are the people I want them having these, anything that I've learned, I want them to have it as opposed to other people are going to do bad things with it. So
Yeah, 1,000%. Well, and then you also have this mindset of legacy. And so we'll get more into that later, but I think that goes hand in hand into your teaching, everything about passing on these skills, passing on these abilities, it essentially creates a legacy of thought and then values. So everything that you teach, at the heart of it's going to come down to, well, you have to have a certain set of values, particularly in how you look at your customer and how you treat your customer and, how you are excellent in your business in order for you to make the money that you want to make, which, that's only one piece of the legacy. The values really are at the crux of it. So
yeah.
For anybody who was not able to keep up with all of that, in summary, you really didn't have a foundation when you got started. You had almost everything working against you. Homeschool mom, never had learned business, in any other context. And you really learned trial by fire. And then you made several businesses very successful while also homeschooling. So the first thought that comes to my mind, and this is a big reason why I wanted to talk to you. It has a lot to do with your time management and how you look at your day and how you handle homeschooling, how you balance your business. I feel in some respect, when I look from outside looking in, it seems like you've made very particular choices in your priorities and even maybe in your business model. I don't know how much that played into it based upon what you actually wanted to see in your life. So can you just talk a little bit about, how do you structure your day? Because real quick, just one piece of context on this. I think that most parents who want to teach their kids entrepreneurship, or maybe want to be an entrepreneur themselves, their first thoughts are, one, they're unsure how to get started. And that was a journey that you went on. But then on top of that, they already feel like they're way too busy in order to like fit all this stuff in. So I know that because I'm like pretty familiar with what you've taught. And I know you talk about your big 3 secrets and sort of how you balance life, how you balance your business, how you balance your homeschooling. And I'm sure family time and all that fits into that. So can you just break that down a little bit about how you're structuring your day and how you look at those things?
Yeah, this is such a huge topic. I mean, I started writing a book on all of this because there's too much. Like there'd be, honestly, this could be an entire podcast broken into 100 episodes. But there's a lot of context around this. Like we want to just talk time management, some really basic stuff. This is very contextual based on the ages of your kids, right? So it depends. Am I talking to a homeschool parent or not a homeschool parent? I have a lot of philosophy around this.
Yeah.
And so philosophy, breaking down the philosophy, so specifically homeschooling or
let's talk homeschooling, because
Okay.
I think that the first group of people that I personally would like to serve is homeschool families, because I think that there's more opportunity for them to work in some of these things that are outside of the typical school curriculum. So, if my personal goal is to help parents teach their kids entrepreneurship, then ideally I'll start with the ones who probably have the easiest opportunity in front of them. And I think also you can speak directly to that group because you've already problem solved a lot of things that a homeschool parent is going to go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, there's a lot here, but I'll do my best to be concise because there's a lot to unpack. But originally, my homeschool choices, the reason we did this was because I came from this broken background and I had this recency, I don't want to call it recency bias, but kind of where it was like, this just happened to me. This was my childhood. I'm young, married, and I'm like, how do I never repeat this? How do I stop the brokenness? Because I feel like I wasted my entire life up until this moment. And so I'm looking at the future. And I think this is where it all begins, is looking at the future. And number one, you have to believe that there is a future worth fighting for to begin with, that God is doing his work in history. And if he's doing his work in history and he's not just going to rapture us out of this planet and like abandon what he made, well, that kind of changes everything. And so I don't often mean to bring up things like eschatology, but it really matters. What you believe about the future affects the decisions you make today. And so I came from a very fearful place initially where I was like, I just want to hide under a blanket. The Antichrist is going to take over the world and they're going to chop off heads and put on barcodes on our foreheads and we're all going to die. It was like, I was very confused between that eschatology, which is a premillennial kind of a thing. I would get confused between that and like this rapture theory. And I was like, well, which is it? We're getting zapped out or we're living through some future tribulation. So all of this affected my view of the future and if I would even have children and then of everything else. So I have friends with people who have all different kinds of beliefs, but I will tell you the thing that really, really changed my life was learning that there was actually another historical view of this that was historical to the church. And there's an amillennial view and then there's a post-millennial view. And I know you're probably not expecting me to talk about theology when we talk about time management.
It's hard not to.
Everything's related. But first of all, so it starts with a positive view of the future, a positive view of history, and that Christ is putting every enemy under his feet. In fact, he says, my Lord will remain at the right hand of the Father. The Lord said to my Lord, sit at the right hand of the Father until he puts every enemy under his feet. And then comes the end in all this. So it's like, well, okay, well, he did it at the cross. So it was like, definitely it was accomplished then, but it's also progressively happening throughout history as well. And so, because if you just believe you're on the losing team, why would we do anything? The saying goes, it's like polishing brass on a sinking Titanic. Why would you do that? Why would we polish the brass? Why would we be ironing clothes and beautifying if it's a sinking ship? Like, we're on a losing team here? Like, no. So when I became a little more educated, I started reading some books my dad gave me, and I had no idea. And I realized we're on the winning team actually in history. And it doesn't mean it's all happening in our lifetime. We actually have to start thinking generationally. What if we're actually in the early church, not the late church? What if he's going to do stuff over the next several millennia and we're actually the beginning? We're still in the early, so we don't know there's mystery around this, but I started realizing there was a major problem with my thinking. So it all started with the thinking and like, we're on the winning team. And if we're on the winning team, how do we act different than if we're on the losing team? If we're on the winning team, okay, I'm going to really think hard about what I do with my kids because I don't want to repeat the past I had, but also there's a future we're fighting for. So the big thing that had me homeschooling was I watched Vodi Bakkum's Children of Caesar. It was a lecture he gave like in the early 2000s. And really it was this saying, it was about not giving kids over to the government, because the famous saying he said was, if you send your children to Rome for their education, don't be surprised when they come home as Romans. And the point is that indoctrination is always happening. It's a matter of who's indoctrination. Your kids are being programmed, they're being molded, they're being shaped, their thinking's being shaped. And you can call that indoctrination, whatever, but it's happening regardless. So the question is, whose indoctrination? So if you look at what the government has done, what their intentions were with public education, secular humanism, and all of this, and where the state is God and you're your own God, and there is a morality being preached, but it's theirs. And you look at, on contrast, what have the most successful families in the world? We're talking like dynasties. We're talking multi-generational businesses that stayed in the family. I'm studying this right now for 1,000 years. There are still companies alive that are still being run in the same family bloodline for 1,000 years. 5 of them are in Japan. How do they educate their kids? They would never send them to a public education system. That is a guaranteed way to break the line, break the family bond, the generational, values, like they'll just go to smithereens. So no. They keep it in the family. It's private education, or they are staying very, very close to the parents, to the family. There are like, there's like a family lore. It's like some of these go back so far back. It's unbelievable that they actually have like folklore involved because it's so old. But they have, family creeds and things like that, how they deal with business and family. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. But the point is that if we just look outside of our own convenience model that we have today, and we look at what would it take to really build the kingdom of God here on earth through business, through family, through community, all this in the church, what does that actually look like? What might it require me to do now? And am I willing to do that? Am I willing to be uncomfortable? Am I willing to sacrifice for a greater long-term vision? And this is what I find is the most missing from people today. We're so conditioned to think about ourselves, what's convenient for me, what's comfortable for me, and there's no vision further than past their own lifetime. So it starts there, right? So that's the long answer to why are we homeschooling, is because I wasn't going to give my kids to Caesar. No, to program their mind. And I didn't feel qualified to do it, but who else was going to do it? It was like, it's me, right. I guess. My husband and I.
You knew that you wanted certain values in your kids and you wanted to be a deep part of that. And you were willing to kind of jump potentially the skill gap of learning, okay, well, how do I educate them in order to maintain those values?
Absolutely. And today it's never been easier, right? We've got all the resources. You can outsource all kinds of things. So our kids have teachers, they learn languages, they're doing things that I don't have to know that to teach it. Like, and I don't have to teach it myself necessarily, but it's all under my guidance, all by design. It's all by intention. None of it is me just handing them off. And whatever happens, happens. And whatever they're assigned, they're assigned. And I'm just, making them do homework. Like, no.
Yeah.
Everything's by design. So, and in that way, it's a stewardship. It's still a stewardship, but it's more of a decentralized type of stewardship where there's not just one teacher, there's not just one school, there's, we're picking everything and customizing based on the child, based on their interests, passions, and the direction, the needs that we see as a parent, and then guiding them in that way.
Yeah. So like, I think any parent hearing this who potentially is considering homeschooling or is currently homeschooling, they might hear this and be like, all right, cool. That's exactly what I want to do. My assumption is 40 hours a week. Got to be put in 40 hours a week in order to achieve exactly what you described.
Well, one of the things I feel like if someone's considering homeschooling, they're thinking that, I mean, that's just more of a product of our own conditioning, right? We went through the public school, or I grew up, I did everything. I'd done public, private, and homeschool. And so, we have to first unschool ourselves. We have to start with our own to unbrainwash ourselves from the programming we have about how it's supposed to be done. And, let's just look at the outcome, shall we, of how, kids being in school for 8 hours a day, regurgitating information, doing all these exams and all of this. Like, how well are these people actually functioning in society? Do they go on to become, do they increase their station in life, or like, what are these outcomes? And they're abysmal, like worst ever in history. So that's not necessarily the key. And we're having another revolution, right? With digital AI revolution, so that's going to change the game again, because certain things like math and things like that, we're not going to need so much ourselves. We're going to be doing other things. So
certain, like if you've heard of Alpha School, right? Where they, within 2 hours are teaching kids, and they basically have like an AI mentor that is, helping them walk through the basic curriculum. And then these kids are actually testing higher than kids who they're spending 6 to 8 hours in school. So it's like, all right, if that's possible, then how do we do it? Because I think I've heard you say before that you actually get all your homeschooling done in around like 2 hours a day.
Yeah, when it was like the really focused part of, hey, let's sit down, kids. And this is very contextual based on age and what we're doing. So I mean, I have probably a different way of homeschooling than other people do. And this is probably why you also want to talk to me, because how am I doing business and all this stuff?
Yeah.
The way I do things is extremely integrated rather than segmented. So it's not that they never are doing anything out of a workbook or a textbook or courses, or they are. But first of all, we don't care about grades. So we threw grades out the window. I don't care about that. Now, the minute you do that, everything changes. Because if you throw out the grade system, like, what was the purpose of that anyways? It was so that they could go through that public school system, and they could, first of all, everybody's age segregated. So they're all separated into groups based on age and grade. And it was a way for them to see if they're progressing through their predetermined curriculum. It actually is completely useless in the real world. When have you ever gone through life and thought to yourself, boy, being in another group of like 30 other kids exactly my age, that was so helpful for me.
Yeah.
So we threw out grades and exams, really. Like, it's so funny. My oldest son, the first exam that he ever really took was for his driver's license. So it was like a practical one, right? Because learning is not about regurgitation, right? It's about retention and application. If you think about what are we trying to accomplish with education, right?
Right.
We want them to integrate things that they can actually use in real life. Now, there are things that my kids don't necessarily always want to learn that I do require some things, but outside of those minimal requirements, we go all in on their interests and passions. And the reason why I do this is because self-motivation is like a cornerstone in our household. Especially if you're working and you're working on a business, you can't be babysitting every moment of their day, like breathing down their neck. That's not going to work. And it's not fun for them. You're going to get all this resistance anyway. But even greater than that is not just like, oh, I need to free myself up. It was more like, how can I get them to love learning? And how can I get them to love learning so much that they're motivated? And then I don't have to remind them all the time to do X, Y, and Z. How can I help them become self-sufficient, self-managed, self-motivated? And so when you do that, things like grades, things like exams, and these unnecessary burdens of like all these learning outcomes the government gives us, like, that is completely useless. And it doesn't produce any of those things. Those now become chores. They now become tasks that they don't want to do. And then you're going to encounter a lot of resistance. So that's a huge thing that so some people might call my style like unschooling,
Unschool.
but I know that within that there's a very broad range of what that can mean. So I suppose you could put me there if you wanted to. But I know on the spectrum, because there is a spectrum, some people believe that unschooling is like your kids are left unto themselves. They're doing whatever they want with no guidance. We're definitely not on that side of the spectrum. How I would describe it is I look at myself more as a facilitator and a parental like guidance where I'm like, I don't trust that necessarily they know what's good for them all the time, especially when they're young. So they're getting that guidance, they're getting the nudge, they're getting the encouragement. And there's a small, I do personally require some things like we learn phonics and things like that, go through some of the basics. But outside those fundamentals, I want them to really love learning and be excited about what they're doing. And then guess what? Let's say you have your son and he is like obsessed with sharks right now, and this is like a phase he's going through. We just go all in on that phase. And it's like, okay, like every Netflix documentary on sharks, all the books from the library on sharks, we'll go to the museum, we'll go to the science world, we'll go to the aquarium. It's like, basically we take it seriously when they're all in on it, knowing that it won't last maybe forever. They'll change their mind. But guess what? Childhood is the perfect time to change your mind.
Yeah,
And
huge. Yep.
yeah, so we just like go deep on that topic. And next thing you know, I don't have to ask him to read books about it. He's like asking for the books about it.
Right.
So
Which gets his reading in. It's
yeah,
getting like his, potentially some biology, he's getting application of different things. And then even along the way, he's kind of learning how to research something and become knowledgeable about something.
exactly. And then, there's sometimes good opportunities for it's like, okay, well, it's one thing to take it in, but can you communicate what you learned? So there's creative things you can do with that, whether it's like have them write a summary or if it's like a science textbook where they're learning about the thing that they love. I mean, you can literally go anywhere on the internet. In fact, you go to ChatGPT and ask for like prompts, create some kind of a sheet where they can just write out what they learned that day or draw the pictures of what they were, what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
it's like impossible to not create a homeschool experience that is fun and super conducive to that particular child. I personally believe that the public school system in the next 10 years, I think everything's going to be custom education. Everything's going to be customized. And that system is like an old dinosaur system it's already dying, but I think it's going to completely disintegrate and go away.
Yeah, I agree because too much of what is taught in schools is not easy to apply. And then we've already seen the effects. There's nobody who believes that we actually have like a solid school system. And that's part of the reason why I really want to talk more about how we get kids to, one, be excited about entrepreneurship, and then also along with that, be excited about a thing that I think is a core value, which is being a value creator in the world. Because that you can apply to anything. And also, I think that it's AI resistant because if somebody is programmed to look for problems and how to solve them, they're going to be somebody who is very resilient in the marketplace. So they're going to always have valuable skills because they'll know how to teach themselves those skills. They'll know how to keep making themselves useful and learn how to solve problems, which isn't really a thing that's taught in school. So how are you looking at, bring entrepreneurship into your kids' lives? Because they're surrounded by it. And you have two businesses right now where, I'm sure that they have exposure to it. So, two questions there. One is there like a direct way that you teach your kids entrepreneurship? Because I know that they're interested in it. We'll get into their business in a second. But is there a direct way that you're trying to teach them? And then how much are they exposed to your business? Like, are they working in it? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So it's interesting, both when it comes to business and to music. This is not something I've really pushed on them or, required of them. So, and I say this is interestingly because as it turns out, all 5 of my kids are highly musical, highly skilled in what they're doing. Like, I cannot believe it. My 10-year-old son recently, it was like overnight. He doesn't play the piano, but he was playing this like Russian something song. I was like, excuse me, where did you learn that? How did you learn that? Like, what just happened? And so I don't know other than like they see me do it. So this is a key that I'm going to get to. They see me do it. And actually, I wondered how that would go because most of my music is written on the computer with headphones and my keyboard. I'm not playing concerts all the time. So I was like, But it's interesting. So I'm like, my oldest son is a classical pianist, like expert level. I don't even know what. And all three of my daughters, they all play instruments, they all sing. And I didn't push that necessarily, but we can talk about osmosis. I really, really think that people and children are absorbing all the time in the home what's going on, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? So it's the same thing with business. We didn't really push business on the kids, but they are immersed in it. Whether they like it or not, they're immersed. I mean, when I say we're integrated, I mean, my husband and I, we might have a conversation at the dinner table about who we hired that day and stuff like that. Like, we don't like, oh, no business, no talk. Like, that's not really realistic. That's not real life. So real life is all different things at various times when they come up. We will obviously avoid anything too heavy close to bed because then I can't sleep. But other than that, like, things are happening all the time. That's what I mean by an integrated life. And so with the kids, no, I didn't really push it. But I will say now, and again, this is very age appropriate thing, right? So they're getting immersed, they're getting an osmosis. So I never really worried about that. Same thing, I didn't push music, and they're all expert level. I never have to remind them to practice. Again, there's that self-motivation thing coming up with business, never pushed it on them. But like, we have older teens now, most of them are older teens, and they just can't imagine being employees. They're just like, but what I'm not encouraging them to do necessarily is everybody go out and start your own businesses, because I'm starting to take more of a holistic family view of business where not everybody is a founder. Not everybody's a visionary. Not everybody needs to go start a new thing. What could we do to incorporate them into the existing thing we're doing rather than diluting the talent and diluting the energy and the focus? Start bringing them into the fold of the existing businesses, teach them the skills like, hey, you're starting with sweeping the floors, and work your way up. And so that's exactly what we've been doing more officially this year with our oldest two who have graduated. They are literally doing that. I mean, everything from, yes, sweeping the floors because we have our own manufacturing facility, to like actually making the candles that we make, to the shipping department. Like, they have learned every aspect of the business. They're not in leadership at that point. They're learning how to do the skill. And interestingly, as I'm doing the research for the book I'm writing, when I looked at how did these dynasty businesses that have been in business for 1,000 years, who are still run by the same family line, how did they do it? And this is how they do it. All those children didn't go start their own businesses. They incorporate them into the current family business, and they teach them the ground up. And again, they start at the bottom. You have to prove yourself, because it's actually more of an issue of character than skill. You need both. You need the character and skill, but skill can be taught. If you're the next in line for succession and you have not proven that you are responsible and you don't have, integrity and all these things, they're not passing the business to you. And in some cases, when I study these dynasty businesses, like out of Japan, if the son, who would typically be first in line to inherit that family business, if he was not qualified for any of the reasons and the criteria they had, going against the cultural grain, they would give it to the daughter. If she was the only one there, they would do that. And that went against everything just because, she was more qualified. So the point is that we've got to be, I take that and I'm like, okay, what do we learn, right? The kids were folded into the family vision, and there has to be a vision to begin with, or what are we doing? Why are we doing this, right? So some kind of blueprint, there's some kind of vision for the future. And then on the practical side, they're being integrated from a very small age. And so when again, in my research and studies, the kids weren't necessarily told like, you're the one inheriting this, like right out of the gate, but they would be incorporated from very early years, going to work with their parents. They're just seeing it again, it's an osmosis process and really an apprenticeship over decades. And so this is not like okay, I'm retiring, you take over. And they're like, it's day one and they don't have what's needed. No, this is a long-term apprenticeship and a mentorship that happens sometimes in some of these dynasty businesses. It is over many decades. So there's such a commitment there, and obviously relationship. Because, and can you imagine if you didn't have good relationship, like the whole thing just implodes. So the fact they've been able to keep these family lines going for so long, they must be so dedicated to that family culture. There's a really strong identity really strong culture. And then they have a method to passing that business along one generation at a time. So I'm looking at that going, okay, well, I'm just doing the research on this now, and I'm going, I think we're doing it right, actually. I think we're doing exactly what I'm reading about. This is pretty exciting. And maybe there's more that I will unfold and give some more practical things on, but
Yeah.
that gives you kind of any idea.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. I think it's a needed book because you can kind of see it outside looking in with like Dave Ramsey, for example. He's spoken about, how he's trying to set his business up for the next generation of Ramseys to come in. And it's not every Ramsey that's a part of the business. They have a son that has nothing to do with the business, but then they have a son and a daughter who both showed gifts early on, and they brought them from the ground up. They started off on the lowest totem pole, and the expectation was, hey, because you are Ramsey, you're not being given the keys to this, nor are you going to get any favors on your way up. You're actually going to have to work 120%, 150% to actually show that you have what it takes, because all the guys around you are going to be judging you to that standard. Because if you come up and you're only 70%, or maybe you're just 100% as far as like what you can do, your output, all of that, they're not going to respect you as much. And so it really is going to take you coming up through the ranks in order for you to prove yourself and prove to the guys who you might one day lead that you should be the one in charge.
Exactly. So there's these boxes they have to check, can they do it? Like, are they capable? Are they willing? And have they demonstrated they have the character and the skills? And you're right. And it's like, they're big shoes to fill, and they have to prove that they're willing and able to fill those shoes. So I just like that as a challenge, even for us small business owners. It's like, well, how can we incorporate a little bit of that? Because maybe our business is going to be a small business, but maybe our kids are going to turn it into a big business or start something new that will be really big. But it all starts with, never despise small beginnings, right? So we can't compare to these 1,000-year-old businesses, but they started out, it was like they had a day one, somebody started that one, and then they just kept it going. It was one at a time. So I'm just looking to look at the lessons of how we can apply that to multi-generational thinking, which is really such a Christian way of thinking, and the way God builds his kingdom is through generations. So yeah, that's a huge part of my overall philosophy to all of life, really, and the type of education, the way we run our family, the way we integrate everything. It's with that view in mind. And yeah, and I think that the mistakes and the pain and this stuff, we want to write that stuff down too, because the reason we're so motivated is because it's so fresh for us. And my husband had a rough background as well, and it's very fresh in our minds, and it's very easy for the next generations to forget because they didn't experience those things. So how do we make sure that the lessons continue and that they don't need to repeat the mistakes and go through a whole cycle of maybe 3-4 generations where there's more divorce again, and now there's more this, and the pain is back and the dysfunction, and now it takes a couple more generations to get back on track. It's like we can't foresee what our descendants are going to experience, but we can do our best with what we have right now to maybe record this, write it down, make a little family constitution or something like that, and write little books and memoirs and things like that, diaries that we can pass down. Be like, your great 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 grandfather, look at what he said he went through in his life, and maybe he committed adultery or did this or whatever, and he's writing about don't do this, and he's like writing to his future great great grandchildren. I just think we should do more stuff like that, because I mean, what a heritage to have, and have lessons that we can pass down. So
1,000%. If I'm going to sum up what your overall philosophy is and sort of how it works into the tactile, it sounds like from the earliest age, you kind of view parenting almost in whole like an apprenticeship, where they're becoming competent as they go, and you're just sort of setting up, little challenges for them, and then you're incorporating their interests as they go to be able to fuel those challenges. And then as they become more competent, you start to bring them more into things like the business, whether that's sweeping floors or, whether that's, working on the candles or in whatever factor, that works in. You're looking at it like, I want you to kind of, follow me and follow me through these like little mini challenges that I set up for you. And as you pass each challenge, you're showing competency both to me and to yourself.
Yes. And actually, early on, I taught my children about Matthew 25, the parable of the talents. The master gave to each according to his ability. And the thing about that is, so he gave the most to the man who has the most ability, obviously, because there's trust there, there's competence there. He gave the least to the person who had not really proven himself yet. And then that guy with the least amount of skill and ability just goes and buries it because he was afraid of loss, right? But we talk about this aspect of the parable of the talents and stewardship and giving God a return on his investment. And what I did with my kids at a very early age is we talked about how their chores, their room, for example, that your room, you have been given dominion over your room. Now, how you keep that room, do not make any mistake. God is watching to see how you steward the little you've been given. Do you just like make a complete disaster and like that happens, but like, do you clean up? Do you take any pride, any care, and the Lord's watching this because he's looking for people that he can trust, that he can give more to. And it's that, if you can prove that you can take care of the little he's given you, he will set you over much. My son, every time, grumbles about doing dishes or something, I'm like, this is an opportunity. Every time you do something that is like required, like, we all have like different family contributions around the house, laundry, whatnot. Are you doing it with joy? Are you doing a good job? Are you doing it unto the Lord? He's watching to see the quality of your work. And if you can prove to him that you're faithful with a little, he will give you more. So that's how I kind of distill these like big, big, big lessons into like the very practical. And it has like, all I can say is it's not that I'm so good. It's that God's word doesn't return to him void. That's all I can tell you. It doesn't return void. So I've been teaching these principles and like I'm pretty much stopped daily, like anytime we're out, like anytime our kids interact with anybody. And I say this with the most humility and like people are just constantly asking and like commenting about our children, like just the interactions with them. They're blessed by our kids. My children bless me like beyond what I've ever deserved. That's all I can tell you. And it just took me being willing to, I guess, be very soft-hearted to the Lord of how he would want me to do things and be open-minded, do things completely different from how it was done for me. And he's just amazing. He's remarkable what he does to restore and redeem and work through very broken vessels.
I get that.
So,
I get
yeah.
that. I feel the same. There's two really big questions or topics I want to get into. One is just diving into your kids' business and like, how did that get started? Like their kids, I assume you didn't like just pay for everything for them. Like, what did that kind of look like? And then another topic I'd like to cover second to that is kind of getting into perhaps examples of the tactical. So like, looking at how you're spending your time kind of split between these two domains. Because I think if we can solve, for one, what does a business look like for a kid? And because it's going to be learning plus doing at the same time. And then if we can also solve potentially the time constraint of applying this and like how much time in the day is dedicated to it, that might help parents get a really good vision for how this get integrated into their lives.
Yeah. So yeah, my daughters and my son at one point, he was more involved, started a little book box business, and it was just based on their own desires and needs. Like they love reading and we like fantasy and different things like that. And when we had tried some different like book box subscriptions, but they were like garbage books. And so we like made bonfires out of them in the backyard and all of that. Yeah, and a marshmallow roast. But it was just, they liked the experience of getting this box every month with the little trinkets and fun things. And I was like, I just let them plant little seeds. And I was like, I wonder if there's a or maybe it was them that said, I think there might be a gap in the market, Mom. So I plant the seeds, but then the seeds grow. And I'm like, yeah, well, there might be. And so I would just encourage this. And even if I didn't think, well, oh, I don't have time to like help like mentor them in a whole other thing. I would give them my materials that I had. And they, with this particular business, they called it Lamppost Parcel. They went through my materials and they were completely self-guided, like 100%, because I told them, I'm really tied up, guys, but here's the materials, go through it, learn, and then ask me questions if you need anything. But they were so self-sufficient that I didn't really have to intervene too much. And yeah, so, even if it's just like a hobby business, they don't necessarily intend on making some big, huge thing. That is fantastic skill set. It's a fantastic experience. And the way my daughter has it running, it's primarily my oldest daughter. It's mostly her doing it these days anyway.
How old is she?
She's 17.
And how old was she when she started it, or when they started?
I think, well, they kind of started taking more serious when she was 15. And then last year she really launched it. It was last summer, I think, that it got really launched. So it's a year now. What's making it a little easier for her is she's doing it as a quarterly subscription. So it's not like a month thing, which would be really, she's having to learn so much, right? So she's learned everything that I teach, like building an audience from scratch, validation, market demand, all the research for that. They studied competitors, finding like what they were good or bad at, like profit margins. And then when it comes to, push comes to shove, she's having to learn all the sourcing stuff. Like, so for a subscription box where you're sourcing other components to that subscription or whatever it is, I mean, she's having to negotiate with people like vendors. And she found out how flaky people are. It's like, oh, this person got back to me, then they never got back to me, and like follow up and just all the email communication and tracking and project management and pricing and Shopify, and like is actually like a brilliant education for a kid to do something like that.
So it sounds like your daughter is the like main one kind of like pushing it. So I'm going to speak directly from her. How does she kind of come to you with those problems? And then, what does sort of that interface look like? Is it just like as something comes up, you're like, oh yeah, like this is kind of how I would approach that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's like literally any day, any time. It's random. It's when it comes up. And this is actually how most of our life, I would say that we have a fairly like flexible schedule routine. So this is kind of how I've always been, where there's structure to our days, but there's a lot of flex and a lot of pivoting, and you got to be willing to change it on a dime, because that's life. And that's the life of an entrepreneur as well. So it's not like we had structured times and meetings. Sometimes we would actually have like a little family meeting if she had like she had written down a bunch of things, but a lot of it's happening over the dinner table. And for me, I go back, there's a scripture in Deuteronomy where it talks about teaching them the laws of God. And it's like, you shall walk by the way. And it's like when you lie down and when you rise up, and it's happening all the time, right? So we're teaching all the time. We're answering questions all the time. That's what I mean. It's like very integrated. I don't know how other people do it, but I would lose my mind if everything had to be, in some spreadsheet all the time, and then, so I think for that to work, you have to set your mind, you have to be in a certain disposition where it's like, for example, I always learned early on when homeschooling, doing a business, my kids do come first. And if I'm working in a deep session and my kids interrupt me, too bad. I'm putting my laptop down. The Lord will help me get back into the zone. And I can also plan better, and I can plan a work block. I can get up at 5 a.m. and I can work for 2 or 3 hours before the whole day starts. Sometimes when you're really getting something off the ground and you have to focus, that's your only option, is like planning those blocks that you need uninterrupted before the house is awake or you're staying up late, however your brain works. And I just had to learn how to like welcome the interruptions. And that was an attitude change for me. The problem with my child is my attitude. So yeah, takes a lot of character discipline to, make that work and feel good about it. But it's worth it.
Oh, 100%. Well, and that kind of goes into the schedule. So I like that you said that, because I think that a lot of homeschool families would say, yeah, we're not super organized. Like they probably would relate to you on maybe the feelings of a somewhat chaotic schedule, but you kind of hinted at something there, which is time blocking. So like if I were to break out like a particular day or a particular week, what's kind of the average as far as like how a day or a week might look in the McHenry household?
Yeah. So again, this has really changed a lot over the different stages of life, different stages of business, different stages of our kids, ages and as well. If like at one point when I first started my first business, I had like 5 kids under the age of 7. And that was very intense. And in those days, at early days when I was just starting the business, my husband was still working construction. And so I was by myself. So I made an investment that was a stretch for us, which was I got a babysitter a few times a week to come in for a couple of hours and jump with them on the trampoline in the back, chop some vegetables, and throw in a load of laundry for me. That was the pressure release valve that I needed to fly. Like, that was all I needed. She would just come to our house. I didn't even leave. I would just lock myself in my bedroom, put my headphones on, and get some focused work done. Huge investment. Like I said, the early days, that felt scary. That felt like almost like not beyond our means, but it was like, oh, we're, cutting it thin here. But I built the first 7-figure business off of that. So you got to look at, sometimes I think that some moms specifically, they have this like mom guilt over, well, I have to be the one who physically does all the cleaning. I have to clean the toilets. I have to make the dinner. I have to do the laundry. I have to do everything. And if I'm not, then I'm not, the Proverbs 31 woman, and I'm not and there's just this unnecessary burden put on that. Like, we live in a day and age where you can easily delegate those things, and your children, it's not that they're not going to learn those skills because they're like, well, I want them to learn how to clean. I want them to have the character. I did that too. And I juggled with that too. I'm just talking when they were really little, and it was like, there's only so much they can do. I was teaching them chores, but they couldn't get the deep cleaning stuff done. They weren't doing all the laundry at 7 years old. And so there's age appropriateness and stages, but all I can say is that at each stage, you need to like take an evaluation of what are the things that are taking up all your time that don't deprive the things you want to teach your kids, but that easily someone else can do, at least partially, that would allow you to create some time blocks for focused work. I mean, the business isn't going to build itself. You've got to somehow get that carved out time to not just focus on the business, but make sure that when you are working on the business, you're doing the right things, you're working on the right tasks. Because I see this every single day with newer entrepreneurs where they're filling their time with busy work that doesn't actually move the needle. And so that's one of the first things we do is we do a big time audit. We're looking at where's all their time going. I mean, it's kind of like if someone hires a personal trainer or something, usually they have you take a diary of all the food you're eating for like 3 to 5 days so they can get an understanding of like, what are your macros looking like? What are your calories? Like, let's just get a baseline for where we're at. Like, make sure you write everything down, like all the bites and licks and tastes of things, the BLTs. And then we're going to assess, what's the low hanging fruit here? What can, do we see any major problems in this food diary? Is something way out of whack? Or you eat like 100% carbs and like no protein? Like, what's going on? So we do the same thing with our time. We need to get the macros of our time. And then we can start assessing, like, is there some low hanging fruit here? We could easily just delegate here and there. We could create a time block here. We can, involve our kids, can up their responsibility over here. So like for the longest time, like I haven't done the dishes or the laundry since 2017, personally.
That's amazing.
Myself.
That in and of itself could be worth someone's time in this podcast, that like, hey, if your kids are like somewhat grown and they, you aren't doing the dishes or doing the laundry. I mean, that's actually the first thing that we had with my son. First chore we gave him was picking up the dog poop. So like, that was like easy. His job, anytime he was outside, like, all right, man, here's your thing. And then everything else started like stack on top of that. And then there were certain tasks where like, we're like, oh, this is like an extra responsibility. Like, this is like kind of above and beyond. And so for those, I'll actually pay you something. Like, I'll give you a reward in dollars. And so like, he started to think about things in terms of, oh, well, if I want this thing over here, then I just have to do this many gigs. And that's what we'd call them. I have to do this many gigs in order to get that thing. And so he created like a direct line between, all right, if I help with these other things and the value that I kind of like export, I also get this valuable thing that I want over here.
That's exactly it. Yeah, we pretty much do the same thing. It was like, we're a family, so we all have to contribute. These are like the basics. And then outside of that, we do gigs as well, like over and above. And then it's funny over time, because of that character development, a lot of our kids, they just do stuff without asking, like, or without us having to ask at all, which is the ideal, right? It's like, oh, I didn't even have to ask them to do, or they did something that I was going to ask, but I don't have to because they just went ahead and did it. And so there's a culture of taking initiative. That's the other thing that we end up, when you're self-motivated. And it helps having girls that they love aesthetics and they like decor stuff. So they want things to look a certain way. So they might just start vacuuming because they see it needs to be vacuumed. So they just start, So, but yeah, that's a big thing.
That's huge. I think a cool thing to kind of wrap this all up with is just looking at, you've talked a lot about legacy, and we've talked a lot even just now about legacy. In fact, I feel like the second we opened the door to philosophy, right away, it was like, all right, the root of all this is like truly in legacy and thinking long term. What is kind of like the McHenry legacy? Like, what is the thing that you're specifically trying to build within your family?
So, and just for the record, my married name's actually Harnett, but everyone knows me as McHenry because that's how yeah, so that's totally cool. My husband's used to it. That's my maiden name, and that's how I got known online and through my music industry, because I do like Celtic stuff. So McHenry's very Irish, Scottish, and so I just went with that.
Yeah. Funny enough, I had a friend. I don't know how he found out that there was any connection between you and I. Maybe you had followed me and he saw that, but he was following you. He's like big into like the Viking stuff. And so he was like, oh, snap. Like, I love her music. And I was like, oh, wow, that's crazy.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. So yeah, Leah McHenry, most of my music is just Leah just by itself, like Share or something like that.
Yeah.
So went with that though. That's how I'm known online. So it's just more my online persona. But in any case, we're on the journey. If I can be really frank, we're on the journey of figuring out what exactly that legacy is. So the good thing is, it's not like we have this all figured out. We are on the mission. We're asking God. We're trying to figure that out ourselves, because we're like, again, if you think about it, we're 20 years into our marriage and we're still trying to deprogram some of the old thinking, some of the scars that were left from previous generations. We're still trying to, we're very caught up in the day-to-day of business. I mean, this is all very normal, but ultimately it is about the future. It is about legacy. And so we're on that journey right now as we speak, asking God for guidance on this. What's the thing? Like, is there like some mountain that you want us to claim? Like, what is that thing? And so we're trying to crystallize it right now. We're reading some books, and there's some different things. And we know that business is part of that, but I don't know if it's this business. I don't know if this is a stepping stone to something else in the future. We're on that journey. So I don't have an answer for you yet.
Still in development. Stay tuned.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think, like, I know that this is what we're called to, that God wants us thinking that way as families. I put it this way, in the large scope of things, I know we're building the kingdom of God on earth, and I know that commerce is a huge part of the kingdom. I think 80% of people's lives is spent in the workforce, in the workplace, either through working or, medium exchange of some kind. So I don't know if it's that broad. It might be a lot more specific than that, but we're in the process of learning what it is.
Yeah. Well, I think something that's very easy to glean from this conversation is that the values of where that legacy is going to become has definitely become fairly crystallized, at least in, how your kids are representing it, how you guys are representing it, the fact that osmosis is a positive thing in your household, whereas like in some households, it's not, says a lot to that. And so it definitely seems like the idea of value creation and the idea of, building with a purpose, building with, your faith in mind, all like key cornerstones in that equation, whatever it ends up actually like fully being, right? So awesome. Yeah. Well, where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on Instagram at Real Leah McHenry. And I have a website, but Instagram's like the best place to find me. I chat with people. I'm in the DMs. I do have a team as well. So just reach out anytime. And yeah, I'm just here to try and help people do this very thing, like build that legacy business. If it's like the current business you have, or you're just developing the skills for the next thing. That's really what we're trying to do, is give people the skills to actually be able to be given more than what they currently have. So that's the mission.
Awesome. Leah,
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking the time. This is exciting. It's been a long time coming.
It really has. I really enjoyed this conversation. As you can tell, it's like I clearly don't get to talk about this quite enough, or like these specific questions, because it's like you just uncorked something and I could just pop zilling for hours.
I know. It actually makes me want to just like fly out to Canada and just like, just spend a weekend with you guys.
Yeah. Well, good news. We're in the United States now. We're in Washington.
Oh, snap.
Yeah. So our business has been in Washington for the last 5 years, but we finally just crossed the border and made it official, moved down. We meant to for a long time. Long story to do with like COVID and government losing immigration papers for 2 years and that kind of thing. So
Insane.
yeah. Well, we're here.
Okay.
So yeah. Thanks.
That's awesome.